In the distant corridors of the Galactic Care Unit, where the walls hummed softly with the life-sustaining technology of 1,000 worlds, Nurse Ilara moved with a grace that belied her non-human origins. Her species, the Solari, were known across the galaxy for their keen intelligence and empathetic abilities, traits that made them exceptional caregivers in interstellar medical facilities. Ilara, with her luminescent skin and eyes that shimmered like the twin moons of her home planet, was no exception. Today, her shift in the human ward brought a peculiar challenge that tugged at her innate curiosity. She was assigned to a new patient, a human male named Tom, who had been admitted with a rather unusual complaint. The preliminary reports were vague, mentioning only an unexpected inflammation, a description that did little to prepare her for what she was about to encounter. As she entered Tom's room, the airlock hissing softly behind her, Ilara noticed the dim lighting and the quiet hum of medical equipment. Tom lay reclined on the adjustable hospital bed, his features etched with discomfort. His eyes, a clear blue reminiscent of Earth's skies, a planet Ilara had studied but never visited, met hers with a mix of embarrassment and pain. "Good day, Tom," Ilara greeted, her voice a soothing melody. "I am Nurse Ilara, and I will be caring for you today. How are you feeling at this moment?" Tom shifted awkwardly, his cheeks flushing a deeper shade of red. "It's a bit embarrassing," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the blanket that covered him from the waist down. "I wasn't expecting this." Ilara approached the bedside, her movements fluid and reassuring. "Please, do not feel embarrassment. Our purpose here is to provide care and comfort, regardless of the situation. If you could explain what discomfort you are experiencing, it would aid in my assessment and treatment." With a hesitant nod, Tom explained the onset of his symptoms, describing a burning sensation that had escalated unexpectedly. "It started out as a small discomfort," he said, "but by the time I got here, it was unbearable." Ilara listened intently, her mind processing the information with clinical detachment yet her heart empathizing with his distress. She prepared for a closer examination, her hands expertly adjusting the medical scanner over the area in question. The device whirred gently, its holographic screen flickering with data that only deepened the mystery. The scan revealed an intense heat signature unusual for human physiology, localized and radiating outward in an irregular pattern. Ilara's brow furrowed as she considered the possibilities. Could it be an alien pathogen? Or perhaps a reaction to some new form of medication or environmental exposure? Human anatomy was not her specialty, but her training provided her with enough insight to recognize when something was amiss. "Tom, have you encountered any unfamiliar substances or environments recently? Anything out of the ordinary that might explain this inflammation?" she inquired, her tone both professional and genuinely concerned. He hesitated, his mind racing through the past few days. I don't know. I've been on so many planets lately, it's hard to keep track. But nothing that should cause this." Ilara noted his uncertainty, the way his voice trailed off, laden with unspoken fears. She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her touch cool and soothing. "We will find the cause, Tom. And more importantly, we will treat your discomfort. You are not alone here." As she spoke, a warmth spread through her hand, the warmth of human skin, so different from the cool, ethereal touch of her own kind. It was a stark reminder of the diversity she faced daily in this galactic melting pot of species and ailments. Each patient brought a new learning experience, a new emotional context. Determined to solve this medical puzzle, Ilara continued her examination, her mind weaving through the complexities of interspecies medicine. Meanwhile, her heart, ever empathetic, felt a growing bond with this human who lay vulnerable before her, a bond that transcended their different origins, a bond forged in the universal desire for healing and understanding. The next day arrived with little change in Tom's condition. The inflammation persisted, baffling the facility's most advanced diagnostic algorithms. Ilara, unfazed by the lack of immediate answers, sought deeper understanding. She had spent the night reviewing human anatomical databases, cross-referencing his symptoms with known conditions. But none matched. Her intuition told her there was something here no archive could explain. When she returned to Tom's room, his expression softened at the sight of her. A human response, she realized, not necessarily about her, but about the reassurance of familiarity amid uncertainty. Still, it made her strangely glad. "Good morning, Tom. How are you holding up?" "Same as yesterday," he muttered, voice tight with exhaustion. He shifted in the bed, grimacing. "Maybe worse." Ilara nodded, her luminous fingers tapping a soft rhythm on the MedScanner's console. "I'd like to run a more invasive analysis. Non-harmful, but it will focus on neurological feedback loops. Your body may be interpreting something incorrectly." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You think this is in my head?" "No," she said quickly, her tone firm but kind. "I believe your nervous system may be amplifying the issue. It happens sometimes with cross-species stressors. Your body is resilient, but it reacts strongly to foreign influences." He gave a small nod, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. "All right, do what you need to." Ilara set the scanner to its highest sensitivity. A wave of iridescent light rippled across Tom's lower body, revealing layers of data unseen by human eyes. She stared at the holographic display, her mind racing. There was a disruption, a micro-level energy signature embedded deep in his tissues. Something alive. "Fascinating," she whispered, not realizing she'd spoken aloud. Tom shifted uneasily. "That's not a word I like hearing from my nurse." Ilara hesitated, debating how much to reveal. Transparency was important, especially with humans. Their species valued autonomy and understanding. "There is an anomaly," she admitted. "It appears parasitic, but not in a conventional sense. It's emitting a bioelectric charge." Tom blinked. "A parasite? Inside me?" "Potentially. But it's not feeding on you, at least not in a way we understand. Its presence is causing the inflammation and the heat." She hesitated before adding, "It also seems to be responding to emotional stimuli." Tom let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Emotions? You're saying this thing feeds on my feelings?" "Not feeds," Ilara corrected, her voice calm despite the implications racing through her mind. "It resonates, amplifies, perhaps. It's symbiotic, to some extent." He stared at her, as though searching for some hint this was a joke. Finding none, he shook his head. "This keeps getting better." Ilara's fingers moved swiftly across the scanner's interface, isolating the energy signature. The parasite, if it could be called that, was like nothing she'd encountered. It pulsed in rhythmic intervals, almost musical, its pattern intensifying when Tom showed signs of stress or embarrassment. "Has anything unusual happened to you recently?" she asked again, this time with urgency. "Any contact with unknown species? Artifacts?" Tom's brow furrowed. "I was on Nephra V last week. There was a market. They had these glowing stones. Said they were harmless, just decorative." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "I touched one. It burned my hand a little, but I didn't think much of it." Ilara straightened, her gaze sharpening. "Describe these stones." "Small. Blue. Looked like they were made of crystal, but they gave off this weird hum when you held them." Her heart sank. She'd heard of such objects, remnants of a long-extinct species whose artifacts occasionally surfaced in black markets. The stones were rumored to be conduits of energy, capable of bonding with organic hosts. No two cases of interaction were ever the same. "You may have activated an ancient symbiote," she said, her voice grave. "They're rare, but dangerous. Their purpose is unknown. Some theories suggest they were tools of enlightenment, others believe they were weapons." Tom let out a shaky breath, his hand gripping the edge of the bed. "So what does that mean for me? Can you get it out?" Ilara hesitated. The symbiote was deeply integrated into his neural pathways and circulatory system. Removal could be catastrophic, but leaving it might be worse. "I'll consult with the medical council," she said. "But for now, I need to monitor your emotional state carefully. Its behavior suggests it thrives on certain responses." He raised an eyebrow. "Emotional state? Like what?" "Heightened emotions," she clarified. "Stress, fear, embarrassment. Perhaps even joy or affection." Tom's cheeks flushed, and Ilara tilted her head, observing the sudden spike in the symbiote's activity. Its bioelectric pulses grew erratic, radiating heat. He noticed her expression and groaned. "What now?" "Responded to that," she said carefully. "Responded to what?" he demanded, clearly exasperated. "To your embarrassment?" His face darkened further. "You're telling me this thing gets excited when I'm blushing?" Ilara fought to maintain her composure. Her training demanded professionalism, but the situation was undeniably strange. "It's not about blushing," she said, her tone measured. "It's about the biochemical changes in your body. Increased blood flow. Hormonal shifts." Tom stared at her, then let out a long, defeated sigh. "Great. I've got an alien parasite with a crush on me." Despite the gravity of the situation, Ilara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Amusement? It was rare for her to experience such emotions herself, but humans had a way of drawing out the unexpected. "You're not entirely wrong," she admitted, her voice softer now. "But humor aside, this is serious. I'll need to work quickly to understand its full nature." Tom looked at her, his expression a mixture of fear and reluctant trust. "Just promise me one thing." "What is that?" "No experiments where you poke me with lasers or—" He winced, gesturing vaguely at his lower body. "Anything else invasive?" Ilara nodded solemnly. "I'll do my best to avoid lasers." Despite the tension, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. And though Ilara didn't fully understand why, it made her determined to save him, no matter the cost. Ilara's console flickered with warnings as she isolated the symbiote's bioelectric signature. Its activity spiked unpredictably, synchronized with Tom's fluctuating mood. She calibrated the containment field around his bed, a precaution in case the parasite's resonance destabilized further. "Hold still," she said, her voice calm, masking the tension in her chest. The scanner emitted a low hum, projecting a holographic visualization of the symbiote's tendrils, which had wrapped themselves around Tom's spinal cord. They pulsed faintly, reacting to her presence. "What's it doing?" Tom asked, his voice tight with unease. "It's aware of me," Ilara replied, her luminous eyes narrowing. "Symbiotes of this kind exhibit semisentience. It's testing the boundaries." Tom's brow furrowed. "So it knows you're trying to remove it?" "It doesn't trust me," she said. "Nor should it." She adjusted the scanner's focus, mapping the neural pathways it had infiltrated. The tendrils didn't just cling, they merged seamlessly with his nervous system, sending faint surges of energy through his synapses. Ilara's mind raced. Removing it would likely sever key neural connections. Tom wouldn't survive without an alternative. Before she could continue, the symbiote surged. Tom jerked upright, clutching his chest as a wave of heat rolled through his body. "Tom." Ilara reached for the stabilizer, but the energy field around him flared violently. Her hand froze midair as the parasite's presence filled the room, manifesting as a sharp hum that vibrated through her bones. "Stop." Tom gasped, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's reacting to something." Ilara recalibrated the stabilizer, her voice sharp. "What are you feeling?" "Describe it." "I don't know, like it's angry?" "No, afraid." The symbiote's energy faltered, flickering erratically. Ilara stepped closer, carefully extending her hand toward the field. Her species' bioluminescence shimmered faintly, a calming resonance she used instinctively. The symbiote hesitated, its pulsations slowing. "It's responding to you," Tom said, his breathing uneven. "Why?" Ilara's mind raced. "It senses intent. My species emits electromagnetic signatures that are often interpreted as neutral or benevolent. It may think I'm trying to communicate." The realization sparked an idea. She adjusted the med scanner, amplifying her own bioelectric field. The symbiote's energy stabilized, its erratic pulses smoothing into a steady rhythm. It no longer radiated aggression. Tom exhaled shakily. "Did you just calm it down?" "Partially," Ilara said, her focus unwavering. "But this won't last. It's attached to you for survival. If it feels threatened again, it may retaliate more violently." "What do we do then?" he asked, his voice trembling. She hesitated, weighing the risks. "We need to find common ground. A way to convince it that coexisting doesn't require harming you." Tom stared at her. How do you negotiate with a parasite? Not a parasite, Elara corrected. A symbiote. And like all life forms, it seeks preservation. If we can understand its purpose, we might leverage that. Tom groaned, leaning back against the bed. Fantastic. So now I have to make friends with the thing that's frying my nerves? Not quite, she said, scanning the symbiote's rhythmic signals. But you do need to remain calm. Any emotional spikes will trigger it again. Great, Tom muttered. I'll just ignore the alien thing wrapped around my spine. No big deal. Elara suppressed a small smile. Humans, for all their fragility, had an uncanny resilience. She turned her attention back to the symbiote, determined to decode its purpose before time ran out. The symbiote pulsed again, faint but deliberate. Elara noticed its energy had shifted, almost like a heartbeat synchronizing with Tom's. She adjusted the scanner's frequency, translating the bioelectric signals into a crude neural map. The pattern wasn't random, it was forming a sequence, almost like language. It's trying to communicate, she said, her voice low, steady. Tom blinked. Communicate? With me? Oh. With both of us. Elara's fingers danced over the console, overlaying the symbiote signals with a linguistic matrix designed for nonverbal entities. The hologram flickered, displaying jagged pulses that began resolving into discernible patterns. A crude phrase emerged. Preserve host. Harm detected. Mutual survival. Tom stared at the words, his face pale. It's talking? It understands survival, Elara said, her tone clinical. It's expressing a need to protect itself, but also you. It must believe the connection is symbiotic, not parasitic. Great. So it thinks frying me alive is helping? No, Elara corrected, narrowing her eyes. It's reacting defensively to stimuli it perceives as harmful, fear, pain, even embarrassment. We need to realign its response mechanism. Tom winced, shifting uncomfortably. How do we even do that? Elara hesitated, formulating a strategy. The symbiote's neural integration meant it had access to Tom's endocrine system. If it truly resonated with emotion, it might be possible to alter its behavior by projecting controlled signals. Emotions not tied to survival, but trust and calm. I need you to focus, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Think of something that makes you feel safe. A memory. Something that brings peace. Tom frowned. I don't know. That's not exactly easy right now. Elara leaned closer, her luminous gaze steady. You must try. It's the only way to show it you're not a threat. He exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. After a long pause, his breathing steadied. Okay, he said softly. There was a time years ago. I was hiking on Earth, somewhere deep in the mountains. No one around. Just the wind, the trees, and this insane view of the valley below. It felt like freedom. The symbiote's pulses softened, their rhythm aligning with his heartbeat. The room grew quieter, the tension dissipating. It's working, Elara whispered. She amplified the calming signal through the scanner, synchronizing it with Tom's memory. The symbiote's tendrils relaxed, their invasive grip loosening. Tom opened his eyes. Is it backing off? Not fully, Elara said. But it's adapting. It's starting to understand. He glanced at her, his expression a mix of hope and disbelief. So what now? Elara studied the data, her mind racing. The symbiote was responsive, but fragile. Forcing it out could destroy both it and Tom. But if they maintain this balance, it might be possible to achieve full integration without harm. Now, she said carefully, we teach it to coexist. And we hope it learns fast. Elara recalibrated the stabilizer to maintain the fragile equilibrium between Tom and the symbiote. The holographic display showed its tendrils retreating slightly from his neural pathways, their pulse steady but cautious. The bioelectric signals shifted again, this time forming fragmented words. Uncertain. Host distress. Clarify intent. Tom read the projection, his jaw tightening. It's confused. It thinks I'm angry? Not just angry, Elara said, her gaze fixed on the console. It's misinterpreting your responses as hostility. It evolved to survive under very different conditions. We need to reshape how it interprets your emotions. Tom shook his head, his frustration bubbling to the surface. And if I mess up? What happens if I think the wrong thing? Then it might retaliate, Elara said bluntly, but not because it wants to harm you. It's acting on instinct. This is not malice, it's survival. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. So I'm basically hosting a hypersensitive alien mood ring. In a way, she replied, her tone softer. But it's more than that. It's trying to learn you, Tom. It's adapting, and if we guide it, this connection might stabilize without permanent damage. Tom nodded reluctantly, but before he could respond, the symbiote surged again. This time, it wasn't heat or pain. It was a wave of raw energy, vibrating through the room. Elara stumbled back, her bioluminescent skin flickering in response. What the hell was that? Tom gasped, gripping the bed frame. It's broadcasting, Elara said, her voice laced with urgency. It's reaching out, likely searching for others of its kind. Tom's eyes widened. Others? You're saying there might be more of these things out there? Possibly, she said, her fingers flying over the console to contain the signal. But we can't let it continue. If it attracts the wrong kind of attention. The door to the medical bay hissed open, cutting her off. A tall figure entered, clad in the polished armor of the facility's security team. Commander Vex, a Solarian with a reputation for unyielding efficiency, fixed Elara with his cold, unblinking gaze. We detected an unauthorized energy surge, he said, his voice low and metallic. Explain. Elara straightened, positioning herself between Vex and Tom. The patient is bonded with an ancient symbiote. It's reacting to his physiological state. I have the situation under control. Vex's expression didn't change. A symbiote of unknown origin presents a significant threat. Standard protocol requires immediate quarantine and removal. Tom's face went pale. Removal? You mean? Elara cut him off. Removal would kill him. The symbiote is integrated too deeply into his neural network. If we sever it, we risk catastrophic failure. Then it's a calculated risk, Vex said flatly, stepping forward. This facility cannot afford a biohazard of this magnitude. Elara's hands clenched at her sides, her calm demeanor cracking. Commander, with respect, you don't understand the complexity of this situation. The symbiote isn't hostile. It's adapting. Give me time to stabilize the connection. Vex's gaze shifted to Tom, his armored frame towering over the bed. Time is a luxury we don't have. If this entity compromises the facility, the consequences will extend far beyond one patient. Tom flinched under the commander's scrutiny, but Elara stepped closer, her voice unwavering. If you interfere, you'll destroy any chance we have of understanding this life form. And you'll condemn him in the process? For a moment, the room was silent, the tension crackling like static. Finally, Vex straightened, his expression unreadable. You have 12 hours. If the situation is not resolved by then, I will authorize immediate containment. Elara's relief was fleeting as Vex turned and left. She glanced at Tom, who looked shaken but resolute. 12 hours, he muttered. No pressure. Elara returned to the console, her focus razor-sharp. We'll make it work. But I need you to stay with me, Tom. Whatever happens, don't let fear take over. He nodded, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I'm not giving up. Not yet. The symbiote pulsed faintly, its energy calming as though echoing his resolve. Elara narrowed her eyes at the display. Time was running out, and the stakes were higher than ever. Elara intensified her focus, her hands moving swiftly across the console as she expanded the symbiote's neural map. The connections to Tom's nervous system were more intricate than she'd realized, millions of tiny threads woven into his synapses, sending bursts of energy that alternated between harmony and chaos. The symbiote was adapting faster than expected. Tom sat rigid, his breaths shallow but controlled. What's it doing now? It's stabilizing, Elara said, her voice quiet but tense. It's mimicking your neural patterns, learning your body's rhythms. It's trying to anticipate your responses. That sounds good, Tom asked, the uncertainty heavy in his tone. Good and dangerous, she replied. If it mirrors you too closely, it might override critical systems. Your body could stop recognizing the difference between itself and the symbiote. Tom stiffened. You mean it could take over? Not entirely, Elara said. But the balance is fragile. If it becomes the dominant signal, your autonomy could be compromised. Before Tom could respond, the symbiote surged again, its pulses syncing with his elevated heart rate. Elara felt the energy ripple through the room, her skin tingling with the vibration. She adjusted the scanner, amplifying her bioluminescent resonance to counter the disruption. Breathe, she instructed. Focus. It's reacting to your fear. Tom closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. But I'm trying. What else do I need to do? Think, Elara said, her voice firm. Focus on something constant. Something unchanging in your life. It needs to understand stability. Tom hesitated, his expression tightening as he searched for an anchor in the chaos. My sister, he said finally. She's always been there for me. No matter how bad things got. Elara watched as the symbiote's energy shifted, its pulses slowing, the jagged patterns smoothing into a steady rhythm. It resonated with his memory, sinking to the calm he projected. The tendrils that had been tightly coiled around his spinal cord loosened slightly. It's responding, she said, relief flickering in her voice. Your connection is stabilizing. Tom opened his eyes, his gaze meeting hers. So, what now? Do we just keep this thing happy forever? Elara didn't answer immediately. Her mind was already processing the next steps. Stabilization was progress, but it wasn't a solution. The symbiote was still an unknown variable, its purpose and origin a mystery. And then there was the looming threat of Commander Vex's ultimatum. No, she said finally. We need to understand its intentions. Why it bonded with you. What it needs to survive without compromising your autonomy. Any idea how to ask it that? Tom asked, his tone tinged with sarcasm. Elara turned to the console, refining the linguistic matrix she'd used earlier. The symbiote signals were more coherent now, its fragmented phrases forming into something closer to language. She input a direct query into the interface. Why host bond? State purpose? The response was immediate, its pulses sharp and deliberate. Host suitable. Adaptation mutual. Preservation required. Tom leaned forward, squinting at the hologram. Preservation? Of what? Elara's fingers hovered over the console as she considered the phrasing. The symbiote's language suggested more than survival. It implied a directive, a purpose beyond its immediate connection to Tom. She refined the query. Preservation of host or external directive? The symbiote hesitated, its pulses stuttering before resolving into a new pattern. Preservation of legacy. Host essential. Tom frowned. Legacy? What does that mean? Elara's heart sank as understanding dawned. It's not just surviving. It's carrying something, information, memories, maybe even genetic material. You're its vessel. Tom's face went pale. You're saying I'm a storage unit? For some alien species leftovers? Not leftovers, Elara said, her tone sharp. Legacy. This symbiote is a remnant of something ancient, something that might have died out long ago. It chose you because it saw you as capable of preserving that legacy. Tom ran a hand over his face, his frustration boiling over. Great. So I'm some kind of galactic time capsule. And if I screw this up? Elara met his gaze, her expression grave. Then we lose whatever it's carrying. Knowledge, history, maybe even the key to understanding its creators. But more importantly, we lose you. And I won't let that happen. The symbiote pulsed faintly, its energy steadying as if reassured by her resolve. Tom sat back, his shoulders sagging. So, what's the plan? How do we make this thing trust me enough to not fry my brain? Elara didn't hesitate. We teach it what trust means. Together. Elara fine-tuned the linguistic matrix, creating a direct feedback loop between the symbiote's pulses and the holographic interface. It was primitive, but it would allow for clearer communication. The symbiote's patterns glimmered faintly, waiting. Tom, she said without looking up, I'm going to ask it about its creators. If it's carrying something important, understanding its origin might help us. Tom nodded, tension tightening his jaw. Let's just hope it doesn't decide to overload my brain again. Elara entered a new query into the console. Describe legacy source. Purpose of creators. The symbiote hesitated, its pulses slowing before forming a response. Origin, Eridani Prime. Purpose, continuity of essence. Host necessary for propagation. Tom leaned forward. Eridani Prime? Isn't that a dead world? Elara interrupted, her expression grim. The system was sterilized over a century ago. Its sun collapsed into a neutron star, obliterating everything. Tom stared at the hologram. So this thing is the last piece of whatever lived there? Not just the last piece, Elara said. The essence it refers to, it could mean consciousness, culture, even DNA. If it's propagating through you, it's trying to rebuild what was lost. Tom's expression shifted, the weight of the revelation sinking in. So I'm not just a host. I'm part of its survival plan. Elara hesitated, her gaze steady on him. You are. But the question is whether you're willing to bear that responsibility. Before Tom could answer, the symbiote surged. Its pulses grew erratic, and a new message appeared. Imminent threat. Containment failure detected. Alarms blared through the facility. Elara's console flashed with warnings of energy destabilization. The containment field around Tom shimmered, its edges fraying under the strain of the symbiote's output. What's happening? Tom shouted, gripping the bed frame. Elara scrambled to stabilize the field. The symbiote's broadcasting again, it's reacting to something external. As if on cue, the room shook violently. Elara's eyes darted to the overhead display, which showed a proximity alert. An unidentified vessel had entered the facility's restricted zone, its energy readings spiking dangerously. That's no coincidence, she muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. Someone's tracking the symbiote signal. Tom's eyes widened. You think they're here for it? Elara's voice was cold and certain. Yes. And if they breach this facility, they won't care about your survival. The door hissed open, and Commander Vex stormed in, his armor gleaming under the harsh lights. The perimeter has been compromised, he said, his voice like steel. The vessel's energy signature matches known black market syndicates. They're after the artifact. It's not an artifact, Elara snapped. It's a living entity, and it's bonded to my patient. Vex's unyielding gaze shifted to Tom, then back to Elara. That bond makes him a liability. If they take him, they'll weaponize the symbiote. Then we don't let them take him, Elara said firmly. We protect both of them. Vex's lips curled in a faint sneer. You think we have time for moral debates? If they breach the facility, we'll all be dead. Elara stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. If you harm him, you'll destroy any chance of understanding what this symbiote carries. Do you want to explain to the High Council why you obliterated a potential breakthrough? Before Vex could reply, the room shuddered again. The overhead lights flickered as the facility's shield generators strained against the incoming assault. Tom clutched his head, groaning as the symbiote surged within him. It's doing something. I can feel it, it's trying to reach out. Elara turned back to the console, her mind racing. It's sensing the threat. It's amplifying your neural signals to protect itself. That doesn't feel like protection, Tom gritted out, his body tensing as another wave of energy radiated from him. Elara's fingers flew across the controls. Let it guide you, Tom. Don't fight it. Focus on control, show it you're capable of defending both of you. Tom closed his eyes, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The symbiote's energy steadied, its pulses aligning with his breathing. The containment field stabilized, the erratic surges dimming. It's responding, Elara said, her voice edged with relief. You're synchronizing. Before they could regroup, Vex's communicator crackled. Commander, hostiles have breached the outer defenses. We're running out of time. Elara turned to him, her expression resolute. You want to stop them? Then let us use this. If the symbiote can amplify Tom's neural output, it might disrupt their systems. Vex hesitated, torn between protocol and the impossible situation unraveling before him. If this fails, we're all dead. Then it won't fail, Elara said, locking eyes with Tom. Are you ready? Tom swallowed hard, his gaze steely despite the fear in his eyes. Let's do it. The symbiote pulsed brightly, its energy merging with his resolve. Elara activated the interface, channeling the amplified signals through the facility systems. As the hostile vessel loomed closer, the room filled with a low hum, the sound of two minds, human and alien, working as one. The energy surged through the facility systems, raw and untamed. The symbiote's pulses synced with Tom's focused thoughts, creating a feedback loop that resonated outward. Elara monitored the output, her fingers flying across the console to keep the energy from overloading the grid. Focus, Tom, she urged. You need to direct it. Imagine the attacker's systems shutting down. Target them in your mind. Tom gritted his teeth, beads of sweat running down his face. I'm trying, it's like steering a hurricane. The hostile vessel closed in, its weapons charging. Facility alarms wailed, the warning lights painting the room in frantic red. Elara adjusted the symbiote's output, channeling its energy into a coherent wave. You're doing it, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. It's responding to your intent. Keep going. Outside, the hostile ship's systems flickered. Its energy signatures fluctuated wildly, the targeting systems failing as the symbiote's wave disrupted their infrastructure. The vessel veered off course, colliding with the outer shield and ricocheting into a slow spin. It's working, Vex muttered, his expression unreadable as he watched the live feed. But the power draw is destabilizing the facility. Elara ignored him, her focus on Tom. His breathing was labored, his body trembling under the strain of maintaining control. The symbiote's tendrils pulsed brighter, its energy pushing his nervous system to its limits. Tom, you need to ease back, Elara said urgently. If you keep pushing, it'll burn you out. Tom groaned, his hands gripping the edge of the bed. I can't, it's not letting me stop. The symbiote's pulses intensified, feeding on the heightened adrenaline coursing through him. Elara recalibrated the interface, trying to dampen the energy spikes. The symbiote resisted, its patterns fracturing into chaotic bursts. It's scared, she realized aloud. It's reacting to your fear of losing control. You have to show it trust, Tom. It's the only way. He closed his eyes, his breaths shaky but deliberate. All right, I'll try. The pulses slowed, aligning again with his heart rate. Elara steadied the feedback loop, creating a balance between his neural output and the symbiote's energy. The hostile ship powered down completely, its systems rendered inert. The room went silent, save for the faint hum of the containment field. Tom sagged against the bed, his chest heaving. The symbiote's glow dimmed, its energy settling into a calm, steady rhythm. Vex's communicator crackled again. Commander, hostiles have retreated. No further threats detected. Vex gave a curt nod, then turned to Elara. Whatever you did, it worked. But this isn't over. That thing is still a liability. Elara stepped in front of Tom, her voice firm. It's not a liability. It's a living being and it just saved all of us. Vex's gaze lingered on her, cold and calculating. 12 hours, he said before turning and leaving the room. Tom looked up at Elara, exhaustion etched into his face. Is it over? For now, she said, her voice softer. But we've bought time, and that's enough to keep going. The symbiote pulsed faintly, a quiet echo of their shared survival. Elara adjusted the containment field around Tom, reinforcing its parameters as the symbiote settled. Its energy pulsed faintly, no longer erratic but still alive with an undeniable presence. She could feel its faint hum in the air, a rhythm that seemed tied to Tom's heartbeat. We need answers, she said quietly, her fingers gliding across the console. She adjusted the linguistic interface, refining it for more complex queries. If it carries a legacy, we have to know what that means. For you. Tom's voice was hoarse but steady. Ask it. Whatever it knows, it's time we find out. Elara entered a direct query. Describe purpose. What does host provide? The response came slower this time, deliberate. Host ensures continuity. Memory, essence, survival. She frowned, her mind working quickly. It's not just data. It's transferring something, something beyond physical form. Tom leaned forward, his exhaustion evident but his curiosity sharper now. Essence? Are we talking about consciousness? Souls? Ilara hesitated, but the symbiote pulsed again, its signals growing in complexity. Another message formed. Post-vital. Rebuild existence. Essence merge required. Tom's brow furrowed. Merge? What does that mean? It means integration, Ilara said slowly. It's not just living inside you, it's becoming part of you. Its survival depends on your acceptance. His voice dropped. And if I don't? Ilara didn't look away from the console. Then it won't survive. But it might take you with it? Tom leaned back, exhaling sharply. So it's all or nothing? The console flickered, and the symbiote's pulses quickened. A new message appeared, fragmented but clear. Trust. Bond necessary. Preservation of both. It's asking you to trust it, Ilara said. This isn't just a biological process. It's symbiotic on every level. Tom ran a hand over his face, staring at the faint glow emanating from the symbiote. How am I supposed to trust something I didn't ask for? Something that could kill me? Ilara stepped closer, her luminous eyes steady on his. It's not about blind trust. It's about choice. If you believe it's worth the risk, you'll have to embrace that bond. Tom was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The symbiote pulsed faintly, its energy steady, waiting. Finally he spoke. I'll try. Ilara nodded, her hands moving swiftly to recalibrate the neural interface. Then we take the next step. Together. Ilara synchronized the interface to Tom's neural patterns, the symbiote's pulsing energy radiating through the holographic display. The tendrils of its essence coiled gently around his nervous system, not invasive, but almost waiting. This was no longer a forced connection, it was an offering. Are you ready? She asked, her voice soft, steady. Tom met her gaze. Oh. But I don't think I'll ever be ready for this. She gave a faint nod, her hands hovering over the console. This isn't just about you anymore, Tom. Whatever this symbiote carries, it's something ancient. Maybe important. But it needs you to survive. I get it, Tom said, exhaling deeply. It's not just about me. Let's do it. Ilara initiated the integration protocol. The symbiote's pulses quickened, and Tom arched slightly in the bed, his muscles tensing as the energy flowed through him. The tendrils glowed brighter, weaving deeper into his neural pathways. For a moment, the room was filled with a low, resonant hum, like the harmonics of a distant galaxy. Then the symbiote spoke, not through the interface, but directly into Tom's mind. You are the bridge. Together, we restore what was lost. Tom's breath hitched, his eyes wide as visions flooded his mind. He saw glimpses of a world bathed in twin suns, its cities soaring like crystal spires. He felt the weight of an ancient civilization's last moments, their desperate attempts to preserve their essence as their sun collapsed. And then he understood, the symbiote wasn't just a remnant of their legacy. It was their final hope. It's everything, Tom whispered, his voice trembling. Their history. Their people. It's all in here. Ilara monitored his vitals, her heart racing as the symbiote's integration stabilized. The energy pulses smoothed into perfect harmony with his body, the once fragile balance now fully aligned. You're connected now, she said, her voice quiet. Not just to it but to them. Tom sat up slowly, his expression distant as he processed the enormity of what he'd experienced. They trusted me. They didn't have a choice, but they trusted me. And now you carry their legacy, Ilara said. But this isn't just about carrying it. It's about deciding what to do with it. The facility shook again, the alarms jolting them back to the present. Vex stormed into the room, his weapon drawn. The hostiles are regrouping. We need to act now. Tom stood, his movement steadier than Ilara had expected. The symbiote's presence radiated through him, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. We don't fight them, he said firmly. We show them. Show them what? Vex demanded. Tom met his gaze, the faint glow of the symbiote reflecting in his eyes. What trust looks like. What unity can do. Vex hesitated, clearly skeptical, but Elara placed a hand on his arm. "Trust him," she said. "This is bigger than us." Tom stepped toward the console, his hand hovering over the interface. The symbiote pulsed within him, guiding his thoughts, amplifying his intentions. He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection, and sent a signal, not one of aggression, but one of understanding. The hostile ship stopped its approach. Its systems flickered, then stabilized. A message appeared on the facility's display. "We recognize the legacy. We will not harm the host." Elara exhaled in relief as the ship powered down, its weapons retracting. The tension in the room dissolved as the vessel drifted away, disappearing into the void. Tom turned to Elara, his expression calm but resolute. "It's not over. They know what I carry now. Others will come." Elara nodded. "Then we'll be ready. You're not alone in this." The symbiote pulsed once more, its energy a faint but steady presence. Tom smiled faintly, the weight of his new purpose settling over him. "Neither are they." And for the first time in centuries, the legacy of Eridani Prime lived again.